Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement. We are out of town this week up in Ohio visiting family, so it may sound a little different because we're out of studio, but we are here to bring you quality, or hopefully quality, pickleball information, and studio is always secondary. Right? Getting you the information is primary. Hope you're having a great week. Quick update on our end. We just finished our Tampa camps last week. That was a lot of fun. We had 3 camps. A 3-day, a 2-day, and a 3-day. So we had a total of almost close to 48 students. Might have been about 45 because of some COVID cancellations. But it was a lot of fun meeting those players from all over the place, including Canada, and teaching them some pickleball. And, I think they came away with better understanding of the game. And you could see it in their play. You could see it first day to last day, a big difference in how they were approaching the game on the court. We always warn our campers that the change is not going to be immediate. So you come to camp and it's not the end of your work. It's frankly the beginning of your work. You're getting the knowledge that you need so that you could then put in the time and effort necessary to accomplish your pickleball objectives. So that was a lot of fun. And CJ and I are hard at work putting the success path together, finishing it up for WeArePickleball. Hopefully have that launched in March. Actually, hopefully. We're going to have it launched in March. And it's going to be a very effective way to learn the game, so we're looking forward to that. And then we also have the videos on YouTube that we've been putting out. We've been really focusing on getting you some good information there. The Into Pickle channel, we just published the video about the Respect the X and updated on that. And then in CJ's channel on Better Pickleball, we put out a video about consistency and how important that is. And how to improve the consistency of your game. So make sure you're checking those out on our YouTube channels. This week's podcast, we're going to be talking about something that came up in our survey, which is forehand in the middle. Players love forehand in the middle, and we're going to address that in this week's podcast. We're going to talk about when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, the forehand in the middle. And the riff, I'm going to give you an update on injury prevention. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to give you an update on where I'm at with my injury, and hopefully that'll help you avoid your injury. So if you're ready for the podcast, let's jump right in. Are you planning on playing pickleball on an indoor surface, meaning a polished concrete or wood surface like in a gym? If you are, consider adding a pair of indoor pickleball shoes to your bag. There is a big difference between outdoor shoes made for a tennis court and indoor shoes made for a gym type surface. You can check out Tyroll's indoor shoes designed specifically for pickleball. It's the shoe that CJ and I both wear. I'll link to it below. We put out a survey because we're always curious as to what it is that pickleball players are thinking about the game, what it is that's going on, that is whether troubling them or some area that they want to focus on and things like that. So we're always asking those kinds of questions, always curious about them. So we put out a survey. We asked you all several questions. One of the things that we got one of the feedback we got was this idea of forehand in the middle. It's one of those things that you hear all over the place when you're out in rec play. Players will talk about, hey, that was my ball. Why? Forehand in the middle. Or I took that ball. Why? Forehand in the middle. And, we're not saying that forehand in the middle doesn't apply ever. It does apply sometimes, but it is not an overriding principle. It doesn't override other principles that are as appropriate, if not more appropriate, than forehand in the middle when you're playing pickleball. A good example of that is Respect the X. And that's a video that we just put out last week on Into Pickles, or depending on when you're listening to this. But if you go to Into Pickle, search Respect the X, there's actually a playlist on it. That's how important it is. And it's one of the concepts that we first started to articulate several years ago when we first started the channel. And we've been fine-tuning it and showing, doing some game breakdowns and things like that, exploring the Respect the X concept. And we would suggest to you that the Respect the X concept is way more important than forehand in the middle. In other words, if you have to choose between simply forehand in the middle and respecting the X, you should normally respect the X. I'll give you an exception to that in a second, which is in response to a question that we got recently about the respect the X and the forehand in the middle, particularly on a short return. So I'll dive into that a little more in a minute. But generally speaking, there are other principles that are as, if not more important than forehand in the middle. Respect the X is one, and if you watch the video, it's clearer to understand visually than in the podcast, but I'll describe it briefly. Basically, the idea is that if a return of serve is coming, let's say from left to right, so it's coming, the player on the right served and the player on the right returned, right? And so the ball's coming from left to right across the court back into the server side. What will happen is you'll have a right-handed player on the left side reach across with their forehand to hit the third shot. That usually is not the optimal shot that you want to hit as the serve team. Usually it is better in that situation to have the player on the right, the server, hit the third shot, even if it's their backhand. 3 reasons. 1, you have a mechanical advantage as the backhand, and you can think about that yourself. Just take a paddle in your hand, take your paddle in your right hand if you're right-handed, and stretch out for a forehand third shot. Much more difficult to hit that shot than it is to hit a third shot on the backhand side when the ball's coming towards you, towards your zone. Second reason is it opens up the court. So the player on the left comes over to the right to handle that third shot, opening up the court on the left. A lot of times subject to attack there. That's not the best. The last reason, and one that's often overlooked, is it pins the server back. So what happens is the non-server, right, the player on the left side, comes over to the right side to hit the third shot. Now the server who's on the right side can't move. So that server is just pinned back behind the baseline. That's not good. You want to have at least one player should be free to move forward in the event that there's a good third shot or an opportunity is created. And by pinning the player back, you're basically you're taking one of the weapons out of the serve team's arsenal on the third shot situation. So that's an example of where this forehand in the middle idea can sometimes muddy the waters and not give you the best situation or not give you the best shot for your side. Another way to think about it in the forehand in the middle would be like an attack shot. Say you have a floater up at the non-volley zone line, and the player with the forehand in the middle is off the line. So they're back some. Technically, their forehand would be hitting it if you let it go, but it's better in that situation for the backhand to hit the ball because the ball is closer to the net and also higher up. So those are a couple of scenarios where forehand in the middle, or the idea of forehand in the middle, can really end up hampering you or hurting you rather than helping you. Now let's talk about a situation where forehand in the middle may be the best approach, depending on the strengths of the players, but it may be the best approach. One scenario would be where you have a short return of serve that can be attacked. So imagine a return of serve that lands, say, 4 or 5 feet behind the non-volley zone line in sort of a high arc. So it's sitting up there, can be attacked. Unless the player whose backhand is to that ball has a better backhand. In other words, that's a stronger shot. In that case, more often than not, the forehand is going to be the better shot. But rather than it being forehand in the middle, think about it in terms of what's the best shot for my team. And if the best shot for your team is the forehand in the middle, that happens to be in the middle, then let that forehand take the shot. If it, however, is the backhand in the middle, then allow the backhand to take the shot. So rather than thinking about it just in terms of forehand in the middle, I'm going to take it, period, end of story, think about it more in terms of what's the best shot for my team, and that'll generally end up with a better result. The point of this is, one, to challenge a little bit the forehand in the middle idea when you hear it out there, because you're going to hear it out there in rec play all the time, but also to suggest that as you understand the game better, these maxims like forehand in the middle simply don't apply many times and are applied inappropriately. Even a concept that's near and dear to our hearts, respect the X, is a concept that the more you understand it and the better you understand it, the better you'll be able to apply it. So you won't apply respect the X blindly and just say respect the X no matter what, because there are situations where breaking the X makes sense. What you understand is respect the X is basically like a default sort of situation or default strategy or approach where you basically will respect the X unless there's a reason to break the X. And again, that kind of understanding of the game will help you play a fuller, we believe, more enjoyable game of pickleball, because you'll see the game more fully and appreciate its intricacies a little bit better. So hopefully that helps with the forehand in the middle idea and understanding how that applies and doesn't apply. And again, don't just apply these maxims blindly. Study the game. Understand the game better. If we can help you at WeArePickleball, that's what we like doing. So feel free to come over to WeArePickleball.com and check us out when our Success Path launches in March. That kind of information will definitely help you understand the game better. All right, in the riff, we're going to be talking about some injury prevention. We're just into 2022, just getting our feet wet in the year, and I want to talk about injury prevention for this year and give you an update on where I am with my back injury, which I mentioned in a prior episode. Stay tuned for the riff. So the verdict is in, and the paddle that CJ Johnson, myself, Tony Roig, and my wife Jill are all playing with is the new Icon paddle, a relatively new Icon paddle from Diadem Pickleball. We've actually been playing with this paddle for several months now, and we wanted to make sure it performed up to our expectations, and I got to tell you, this is an awesome paddle. It has some of the best playability of any paddle that we've ever played with, and Jill's arm that used to have the ice after she played no longer needs icing. So it's an awesome paddle. If you want to read more about the paddle, I'll link to the full review down in the show notes. And if you use the code WeArePickleball at Diadem Pickleball, you'll get our discount. If you decide to give the Diadem Icon paddle a try, send me an email, tony@wearepickleball.com, and let us know how it went. Let's talk a little bit about injury prevention. I think this is one of those areas where pickleball players don't spend enough time on this subject. We basically, we even as content creators, we want to bring you information on helping you improve your game, so the strokes and things like that. But if you're injured, then your strokes don't matter, right? If you're sitting on the sideline, strokes are no good. So we're going to try and do a little more this year, bring you some more information on not just your body, but also on your mind, on improving those, so that you can make sure that you can play longer sessions and play more sessions and keep on playing this game that you love. And so what I wanted to do is share with you an update on my personal story, because I think that's the easiest way to explain injury prevention and injury recovery and things like that is to speak from personal knowledge. So about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I injured my back, literally not doing anything, literally walking. I walked down some flights of stairs from our condo down to the parking lot to help Jill with a bike rack on the back of the SUV. And I came downstairs. I think I rounded a corner. That's all I did. I just turned a corner, and boom, there went my back. And I have a lower back that I've had this problem. It arises once in a while, every few years. And I had done pretty good because I had been, for a while there, I'd been focusing on my core. I'd been doing this set of exercises called the McGill 3, MCGILL 3. Dr. McGill is a pretty famous gentleman in the area of the lower back. So I'd been doing the McGill 3 for a while, focusing on my core, focusing on that whole strip down there by the, from the belly to the back, and had been doing pretty well. Well, I had been slacking off probably the last, 4 or 5 months before the injury. It had dropped off the radar, that kind of exercise. And so sure enough, I walked downstairs, turned, and bam, injured my back. And as I read, I ordered Dr. McGill's book because I was curious. I wanted to learn more about my back and what was going on. And what really struck me is he describes the back as, hopefully you know this game, but it's called Jenga. It's that game where you have the wood blocks in a stack and you pull out a piece and a piece until it falls over. And so he basically describes the back as like a Jenga tower, so to speak. And then the muscles around it are like guy wires. So like, like those tall metal antennas that are used for cell phone towers and things like that, radio towers. They have, they're lanky and tall, and then they have those guy wires that hold them in place. So the spine is basically like that. It's just this like jumble of vertebrae that are stacked one on top of the other, and then they're held together by these muscles that basically hold them into their form, right? And so what happens is, if the muscles get either weak or out of alignment, so that one side's pulling too much or the other one's not strong enough to pull back and things like that, that Jenga tower basically starts to shift. And as it shifts, that's where you end up with back pain. So that made perfect sense to me, or makes perfect sense to me. And it helps me understand, even as I move through the day these days, because I'm still a little tender back there, is I basically think about it like that Jenga thing, or that Jenga stack. And so if I'm getting out of bed, I basically sit on the edge of the bed for a second. I make sure that I'm focused on the guy wires, on the muscles around my spine, and then I move out of the bed to avoid re-injuring that muscle or minimize the chance of re-injuring it. Another thing I've done is I've re-implemented the McGill 3 and added additional stretches and strengthening exercises. I'm working on the psoas. I'm working on another muscle. I can't remember. It's like the QL, I think it's called. It's a small muscle. I think it's small, that runs behind the back, around the gluteus and that kind of area. So I'm basically trying to work on all these muscles that aren't, they're not like the bicep or the tricep or the quadricep, the major muscles that we think about. There are other muscles that are important, particularly when you're trying to avoid injury. And knowing myself, I know that the back is an area that I need to focus on because of my history. So if you know yourself and you know it's your knee or your hip or your shoulder or your elbow, whatever it is that you tend to have issues with, our advice is take some time and focus on that. Find some exercises that will work to strengthen the area, to stretch the area, to just make the area a more functional unit, if you will. And by doing that research, not only will you play better pickleball and play longer pickleball, you'll also, as you know, enjoy a fuller and better life without the injury. So that's a little personal story for you to hopefully help you on your process or your journey on reducing injuries in your life and maintaining yourself on the pickleball court as much as possible. Hope you enjoyed the podcast this week. Have a great week. We'll be back next week with podcast 71. Can't believe we're on podcast 70 on this one, but it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. As always, if you enjoyed it, please rate and review it wherever you're listening to this. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with your friends. If you're active on social media, put it on there. Put it on Facebook. Put it on Instagram. Whatever it is that you're active on. One of our challenges as with any content creator is getting the content in front of listeners, in front of viewers. And if you enjoy the content, I'm pretty confident they will too. Have a great week. We'll see you next week, and be well out there.